No one in the quiet, luxurious Monteverde mansion expected that two newborn babies could bring so much chaos. But for Ethan Monteverde, a young widowed millionaire still grieving the tragic loss of his wife, the nights had become a battlefield, one he felt he was quickly losing. The twins, Aiden and Ava, barely 3 weeks old, were beautiful, delicate, and healthy. Yet they did not sleep. Not for a minute, not for an hour, not even in the soft silence of dawn, when babies usually surrendered to the rhythm of rest. No, these two cried through every hour of the day and night, their tiny voices echoing through the marble corridors like a haunting reminder that the Monteverde mansion had lost its peace. Doctors came and left. Pediatric specialists examined the babies again and again. Nothing wrong, they said. They are perfectly healthy. But Ethan knew something was wrong. Something he couldn't explain. Something deeper. Sleep-deprived and emotionally broken, he found himself pacing the halls at 3 a.m., wearing the same shirt from the day before, his eyes heavy and his spirit heavier. The once confident, respected CEO had become a ghost inside his own home. His employees whispered among themselves, "He's not the same since his wife died. He barely eats. I've never seen babies cry like that." The mansion had once been filled with laughter, sunlight, and the warmth of family. Ever since Isabella, his beloved wife, died during childbirth, the air felt cold, heavy, almost cursed. And that was when she arrived. Maya Sullivan, a quiet, thin young woman in her early 20s, walked into the mansion on a rainy Thursday afternoon. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes like the other house staff. Her shoes were worn, her jacket patched, her hair tied back in a simple braid. She carried with her only a small notebook and a bag so light it looked empty. She had been hired last minute by the chief housekeeper to fill a gap the mansion desperately needed. Someone to help, clean the nursery and assist with basic chores. Nothing more. Nothing important. At least, that's what everyone thought. But there was something different about her. When she stepped inside the nursery for the first time, she paused, not out of fear, but out of a strange, deep intuition, as if she could feel an energy no one else could sense. She approached the twins gently, her eyes soft, almost glowing with an emotion no one understood. And then something happened. For the first time in weeks, Aiden stopped crying. His tiny chest rose and fell slowly, calmly. Ava's trembling lips relaxed. The redness in her face faded. Their little fists unclenched. For the first time since their birth, the Monteverde twins fell silent. Maya didn't touch them. She didn't speak. She simply stood near their cradles, humming a melody so soft, so pure, that even the air seemed to stop to listen. Ethan rushed in seconds later, expecting another crisis, but what he saw froze him in place. The nursery was peaceful, silent. The twins were staring at the mysterious young woman with wide, calm eyes, as if they recognized her, as if they trusted her. No one had ever seen anything like it. Maya turned to Ethan, her voice nearly a whisper. "Sir, your children aren't crying because they're in pain. They're crying because they're alone." Ethan didn't understand. No one did. But one thing was undeniable. This quiet, poor cleaner, someone who was never supposed to be more than a forgettable employee, had done in seconds what doctors, nurses, specialists, and even the grieving father himself couldn't do. She had brought peace to the twins, and from that moment on, nothing in the Monteverde mansion, nothing in Ethan's life, and nothing in the future of those newborn babies would ever be the same. For the first time in weeks, Ethan Monteverde felt something he thought he had lost the day Isabella died. Hope, but he didn't trust it. Hope to him had become dangerous, like a fragile flame that the smallest wind could destroy. He stood frozen in the doorway of the nursery, watching Maya as if she were some apparition. The twins, who had screamed relentlessly night after night, now gazed at her with a serenity that bordered on the supernatural. Aiden's tiny fingers curled gently toward her direction. Ava blinked slowly, her breathing soft and steady. Both infants seemed to fall into a rhythm with the quiet melody Maya hummed, a lullaby that felt older than time, something familiar yet impossible to place, like the echo of a memory. Ethan swallowed hard. Who are you?" he whispered, unable to find his voice. Maya looked up, startled, as if she hadn't even realized he was there. "I'm just the new cleaner, sir," she said quickly, lowering her eyes. I didn't mean to overstep. I heard them crying and I thought." "You thought what?" Ethan stepped forward, unable to hide the tremor in his tone. She hesitated, her fingers twisting nervously around the edge of her sleeve. I thought they needed someone to listen. Babies feel more than we think. Especially these two. Ethan blinked, confused. What do you mean by especially these two? But Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gently approached the cradle again and laid one hand near Ava's little foot, not touching, but close enough that the baby cooed, her tiny legs relaxing. I've always had a way with newborns, Maya said softly. Back in my neighborhood, people used to ask me to help with their babies when they wouldn't sleep. They said I had a calming presence. I don't know why. I don't understand it either. Her voice carried a mix of humility and something else, something she was hiding. Ethan's heart pounded. He had met every kind of expert since Isabella's death, psychologists, pediatricians, sleep specialists, but none had helped. Yet here was a young, poor woman with no credentials, no training, no experience, and she had done the impossible. Please, Ethan said softly, don't leave. The desperation in his voice surprised even him. Maya nodded shyly, but her eyes held something fragile, almost haunted. Later, that night, the mansion staff couldn't believe what they were seeing. The kitchen buzzed with whispered conversations. The gardeners exchanged glances. Even the head housekeeper, who prided herself on maintaining strict order, was seen peeking around corners. Everyone had heard the news. The twins had slept for 20 minutes, the longest they had ever slept since the day they were born. 20 minutes. It was nothing for most families, but for the Monteverdis, it felt like a miracle. Ethan, however, didn't sleep at all. He stood outside the nursery, leaning against the wall, listening to the faintest murmurs inside. Maya stayed with the babies, sitting in a rocking chair, humming that same unfamiliar lullaby. As Ethan watched through the crack of the door, he noticed something unusual. She didn't look tired. She didn't look overwhelmed. She looked connected to them. At one point, Ava began stirring, her tiny face tightening. Ethan panicked, stepping toward the door, but Maya simply reached out her hand and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe." To Ethan's shock, Ava settled instantly. How does she do that? He whispered to himself. He felt a strange mix of relief and fear, because deep down, part of him wondered, was this fate, coincidence, or something he wasn't ready to believe in? Something mystical? The strange discovery. The next morning, Ethan found something on the nursery floor, a small folded piece of paper that must have fallen from Maya's notebook. He picked it up without thinking, intending to return it to her. But when he unfolded it, his breath caught. It was a drawing, a crude sketch of two newborn babies, sleeping peacefully. The details were astonishingly accurate. The shape of Aiden's nose, the curve of Ava's cheek, the exact way their tiny fingers curled. But the drawing was dated 3 months ago. 3 months ago. Before the twins were even born. Ethan's hand trembled. What was this? A coincidence? Some strange intuition? Or had Maya known about his babies long before she ever set foot in his home? Heart pounding, he turned the page over and saw a single line written in small, careful handwriting. Not all children cry because they are hungry. Some cry because they remember. Remember what? The womb? The loss of their mother? Something else entirely? Ethan's chest tightened with unease. Before he could gather his thoughts, Maya stepped into the hallway, her eyes widening when she saw what he was holding. That's not, it's just a drawing, she stammered. You drew my children before they existed, Ethan said, his voice low, cautious. Why? Maya backed away slightly, her breath shaky. I can't explain it. Sometimes I see things. Not visions. Not exactly. More like feelings that turn into images. Ethan didn't know whether to believe her or fear her. But what he did know was this. Ever since Maya entered the mansion, the twins had changed. The cries that once echoed endlessly now softened in her presence. Their tiny bodies, once tense with restlessness, relaxed when she approached. And Ethan, who had felt lost for months, suddenly sensed a path opening before him. A path he didn't yet understand. A path he wasn't sure he wanted to take. But he couldn't ignore the truth. Maya wasn't just a cleaner. She wasn't just kind. She wasn't ordinary in any possible way. And something told him, deep in the part of his soul that still believed in impossible things, that Maya was connected to his children in a way no one else on earth was. A connection that would soon reveal secrets Ethan Monteverde was not prepared to face. Ethan Monteverde didn't know how long he stood there holding the drawing. Minutes, hours. Time seemed to stretch, tangled like threads around him. The edges of the world blurred, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Maya remained by the door, her hands clasped tightly together, her shoulders trembling as if she carried a weight too heavy for a girl her age. The twins slept in perfect stillness, as though Maya's presence wrapped them in some invisible cocoon of peace. Ethan finally gathered his voice. "How could you feel them?" he asked quietly. "Before they were born." Maya's lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she simply stepped closer to the twins, her eyes filling with a distant softness, as though seeing something Ethan could not. "Mr. Monteverde," she whispered, "some connections are formed before the world sees them, before we breathe our first breath, before anyone even knows we're coming." Ethan felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Her words didn't sound childish. They didn't even sound like superstition. They sounded like truth, a truth she was afraid of, a moment that felt like a sign. As Ethan studied her face, Ava suddenly stirred. Her tiny chest rose sharply, her mouth puckering as if she was about to cry. Ethan instinctively stepped forward, panic tightening his whole body. But Maya raised one hand, not touching the baby, simply hovering over her, and began whispering something soft. Not English, not Spanish, not any language Ethan recognized. It sounded like a lullaby mixed with a prayer, a melody shaped from breath rather than words. Instantly, impossibly, Ava relaxed again. Ethan staggered back, breathless. What language is that?" he asked. Maya blinked, startled. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just hear it sometimes, in dreams, or when I'm near them." "Near my children?" Ethan asked, voice barely steady. Maya nodded slowly. "They call for someone," she whispered. "I don't know who, but their cries aren't like normal babies. They're filled with something else, something heavy, something that doesn't belong to newborns." Ethan swallowed hard. He had felt it too, as if the babies were grieving something they remembered but could not understand, as if they carried a shadow from before birth. Could such a thing be possible? His rational mind screamed no, but his heart had never been more unsure. The staff begins to fear the unknown. Downstairs, meanwhile, the mansion staff was not reacting with the same awe Ethan felt. The cooks whispered nervously behind the kitchen counter. The butlers exchanged fearful glances. One of the maids refused to go upstairs at all. "I heard her humming," one whispered. "It didn't sound human." Another murmured. "She's not normal," another insisted. "She came from nowhere and suddenly the baby sleep? That's not natural." Rumors grew like weeds. "Maya has powers. Maya is cursed. Maya brought something with her. She's dangerous." Some were frightened, some were fascinated, but all agreed on one thing. Maya was not ordinary, and the mansion had changed since she arrived. Lights flickered more often. Cold drafts appeared in halls that were usually warm. Doors that were tightly closed sometimes creaked open by themselves. Was it coincidence or something else? Ethan heard the whispers, but he didn't believe them. He refused to believe them. Yet deep inside, a seed of uncertainty began to grow. Maya's hidden past. Later that day, while Maya was in the laundry room folding blankets, Ethan approached her cautiously. "Maya, I need to know something," he said gently. "Before you came here, what was your life like?" Her expression darkened. "I grew up alone, mostly," she said softly. "My mother left when I was little. My father died before I learned how to say his name. The neighbors raised me. I went from house to house, helping whoever needed help, sleeping wherever someone offered a couch." Ethan's chest tightened. He had lived in riches all his life. She had lived in survival. "And you never felt connected to anyone?" he asked. Maya hesitated. "I did," she whispered. "Once." Her voice cracked. "A baby in the neighborhood. A little girl named Luisa. She cried every night and no one could calm her, until the day I held her." "And then?" Ethan asked. "She stopped crying," Maya said, a sad smile on her lips. "But something strange happened. She wouldn't go to anyone else after that, not even her mother." She lowered her head. "People said I stole her attachment. They said I was unnatural." Ethan felt a chill. "And what happened to the baby?" Maya looked away, her voice becoming barely audible. "She got sick, and she didn't survive." Ethan froze. A cold shock ran through him. You Think you caused it? Ethan asked, horrified. No, Maya cried, shaking her head desperately. No, but they did. They blamed me. They said babies bonded with me too deeply, that I took something from them. Tears glistened in her eyes. As humanity drifts further and further away from the divine order, the world begins to feel heavier, more chaotic, as though an invisible shadow is slowly covering everything that was once peaceful and pure. People chase after comfort, status, and fleeting pleasures, forgetting that every choice echoes in eternity. The sense of sacredness fades from daily life, and with it, the awareness that we are spiritual beings on a journey far greater than anything material existence can offer. Because of this, the spiritual realm continually tries to warn us, and the signs are becoming increasingly evident for anyone willing to look beyond the surface. We witness families crumbling under emotional distance, resentment, and a lack of genuine affection. Homes that once should have been sanctuaries of warmth and unity now become silent battlegrounds filled with cold words and hearts closed off from each other. Parents become strangers to their own children. Children grow up not knowing how to recognize true love or where to find it. When the family loses its grounding, society begins to collapse like a structure built on cracked foundations. Nothing holds firmly anymore, and moral confusion spreads like a wave that cannot be contained. In this climate, human dignity is often forgotten. People stop treating each other as souls created by God, and instead see one another as obstacles, competition, or tools for personal gain. Compassion becomes scarce. Many walk through life numb, disconnected not only from their spiritual purpose but also from their own inner voice, the voice that once whispered truth, morality, and direction. What we witness is not simply social decay. It is a spiritual crisis of immense proportions. Yet even as darkness attempts to expand, God continues to speak, quietly, subtly, but unmistakably. He whispers in moments of silence, in unexpected emotions that stir the heart, in dreams that feel more real than waking life, and in those sudden realizations that break through the noise of everyday existence. The Holy Spirit still moves through the world, calling souls back to the truth, urging them to remember that they were made for something higher, something eternal, something deeply meaningful. This moment in history is not only a period of trial but also a period of purification. It is a time when every person is invited to pause and reflect on the direction their life is taking. It is a call to return to sincerity, to prayer, to humility, to the simplicity of living in alignment with God's will. Even though the world shakes, even though confusion grows, there is the quiet promise of renewal, a renewal that awaits those who remain faithful, attentive, and willing to listen. What we experience now is a threshold, a transition between what humanity has allowed itself to become and what God is preparing to restore. The shaking is not without purpose. The unrest is not without meaning. Something profound is approaching, something that will redefine the spiritual landscape of the world. And so, as time moved forward, the subtle signs that once seemed distant and symbolic began to take on a more tangible shape in the world. Strange events that people had previously dismissed as coincidences became too frequent, too precise, too deeply aligned with ancient warnings to be ignored. Many felt a quiet stirring in their spirit, a sensation hard to explain but impossible to deny, as though an unseen hand was gently shaking humanity awake. Churches that once stood nearly empty at dawn suddenly saw people arriving in the early hours, some driven by fear, others by a deep longing to rediscover a peace they had lost. Men and women who had not prayed in decades found themselves lighting candles, whispering words they barely remembered. Even those who claimed to believe in nothing at all felt the weight of something pressing upon the earth, something too vast to come from human hands. At the same time, confusion spread through society in ways no one could fully understand. Groups rose claiming to speak in the name of truth, yet each proclaimed a different path. Ideologies clashed louder than ever, each one insisting it held the only answers to the world's problems. But the more the voices fought, the more the deeper truth was drowned out. People started feeling emotionally exhausted, spiritually drained, as if their souls were being stretched between forces they could not see. In the midst of this growing tension, whispers began to circulate about a message said to have been hidden for decades, guarded behind stone walls and sealed archives. Rumors claimed that it contained warnings about events happening now, revelations that some believed were too dangerous to share openly. And yet, the more people tried to suppress these whispers, the more they grew. Some swore that priests in small villages had hinted at mysterious conversations held in the Vatican. Others insisted that certain passages of Scripture seemed to come alive, glowing with new meaning under the weight of modern events. Ordinary people felt drawn to these stories, not simply out of curiosity but because something within them resonated. It was as though their souls recognized a truth that their minds could not yet grasp. They looked around and saw the world changing, breaking, trembling, and deep inside, they felt an urge to prepare, though they were unsure for what. Many began to dream vivid dreams, the kind that lingered long after waking, dreams of stars dimming, of powerful winds sweeping across silent landscapes, of voices calling their names from a radiant light. Others spoke of sensing an invisible presence in their homes, not frightening but solemn, as if inviting them to reflect on their choices and reevaluate the path they were walking. Even the natural world began to reflect the weight of the moment. Animals behaved strangely, skies shifted unpredictably, and the earth itself seemed restless. Scientists searched for explanations, but there was a growing realization that logic alone could not fully describe what was unfolding. Something ancient was resurfacing, something that had been spoken of in hushed tones for generations. Whether people believed or doubted, whether they embraced faith or fled from it, the world unmistakably felt like it was standing on the edge of a revelation. Something hidden was pushing its way toward the light, and humanity, knowingly or not, was being drawn into the heart of that mystery. And as days continued to unfold, the weight pressing upon the world did not lighten. Instead, it deepened, spreading quietly into the corners of life that people once believed were untouched by spiritual matters. Even the children, with their pure instincts and unclouded senses, began reacting to something adults could not see. Some cried without reason, others stared into empty rooms as if watching unseen movement. Many parents brushed it off at first, but in their hearts, a slow uneasiness began to grow. Nighttime became different too. Silence felt heavier. Shadows felt longer. People reported waking at the same exact hour, night after night, with their hearts pounding for reasons they could not explain. Elderly neighbors whispered about hearing sounds carried by the wind, not words, not cries, but something ancient, layered, and sorrowful, like the earth itself was trying to speak. All around the world, strange coincidences began to align. The same symbols appeared in different dreams shared by individuals who had never met. Prophetic passages long forgotten by scholars resurfaced in conversations of ordinary people. A sense of anticipation grew, not the kind sparked by hope, but the kind born from a sacred tension, like standing at the edge of a vast and holy truth. Even technology, so often trusted to explain and categorize the unknown, began failing in unusual ways. Security cameras captured glitches that looked less like errors and more like fleeting silhouettes. Phones turned on by themselves. Radios crackled with static that suddenly formed into echoes of whispers before going silent again. Scientists dismissed these as electromagnetic disturbances, but privately, many admitted the patterns were unlike anything previously recorded. The wealthy sought distractions, throwing themselves into luxury and entertainment, trying to drown out the invisible presence shadowing the world. But no matter how bright the lights or loud the music, they felt a coldness settle behind their ribs, a quiet intuition telling them that something far greater than money or influence was approaching. The poor, on the other hand, sensed the shift more clearly. Perhaps because their lives had always balanced between struggle and hope, they recognized the tremor in the air. They prayed more, gathered more, held each other closer. Some felt comforted by the stirring, others trembled before it, but none could deny it. Spiritual leaders spoke carefully, choosing each word as though it carried immense weight. Some encouraged calm and reflection, others hinted at long-guarded truths. A few, trembling visibly, warned their communities that prophetic cycles, ancient ones, were aligning once again. Amid this rising tension, the widowed millionaire, still trying to protect the fragile peace of his home, noticed changes in the newborn twins. They slept when the poor cleaning woman soothed them. Yes, but now there was something else, something he had not seen before. Their eyes followed things he could not see. They smiled at corners of the room where no one stood. They stretched out their tiny hands as if greeting invisible visitors. The cleaning woman felt it too. Every time she held the babies, a warmth rose beneath her skin, not frightening, but powerful, like the feeling of stepping into sunlight after years of darkness. She whispered prayers under her breath, not out of fear, but out of reverence, as though she sensed that the little ones had a destiny intertwined with the strange awakening happening across the world. Sometimes, late at night, when the mansion was silent, she heard soft murmurs drifting through the hallways, not from the Aicho babies, not from the man, not from the staff, voices that didn't speak any language she knew, yet carried a meaning her soul recognized. They sounded like warnings, or perhaps invitations, and still the truth remained just out of reach, hovering like a veil waiting to be lifted. Something was coming, something immense, something long hidden, something that would bind the fate of the world with the fate of these two tiny children. But no one yet knew what it was, and the clarity, the revelation, the moment of truth was drawing closer, very close. Days turned into weeks, and the strange tension that wrapped itself around the earth finally began to converge into something undeniable. It was as if all the whispers, all the warnings, all the unseen movements in the shadows had been slowly gathering behind a door now trembling on its hinges, ready to burst open. The widowed millionaire felt it most of all. He found himself waking before dawn, standing silently in the nursery as his newborn twins slept. He could feel time tightening around them, as though every second carried a deeper meaning. The babies were peaceful in ways he could not explain. They no longer stirred at night, no longer cried as they once did. They slept with a mysterious serenity that touched something in him that had been dead since the loss of his wife. But the cleaning woman, she was changing too. Her presence in the mansion grew more luminous, more grounded, more quietly powerful. The air felt different when she entered a room, lighter, warmer, filled with a strange calmness that even the grieving millionaire could not deny. He caught himself watching her sometimes, trying to understand what exactly she carried within her, but she never noticed. Her focus was always on the children, whispering prayers that sounded older than her own life, cradling them with a tenderness that seemed guided by something far beyond human instinct. And then, the moment came. It was late evening, the sky a heavy shade of purple, the world unusually silent. Even the air felt suspended, as if holding its breath. The millionaire sat in the living room, papers and half-finished thoughts scattered across the table. But suddenly, without warning, every light in the mansion flickered. Not once, not twice, but in a slow, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. He froze. In the nursery, the twins awoke at the exact same second, not crying, not frightened, but fully alert, their tiny eyes wide open. At Toul, that same moment, the cleaning woman, who had been sweeping the corridor upstairs, dropped the broom. A wave of warmth surged through her body, spreading from her chest to her fingertips. Her legs trembled, her breath caught. She felt something calling, not with words, but with a force so ancient and powerful that she knew she could no longer remain still. She walked toward the nursery, not quickly, not slowly, but with the calm certainty of someone guided by a higher purpose. The millionaire rose too, drawn by some instinct he could not explain, and moved toward the same room. The house felt alive around them, vibrating softly, like an instrument touched by invisible hands. When they entered the nursery, they found the twins no longer lying still. The babies were reaching upward, their small fingers opening and closing as if grasping for something unseen. But what truly stole the millionaire's breath was the light. A soft, pearly glow surrounded the infants. Not bright, not blinding, but undeniably real. The cleaning woman stepped closer, tears flooding her eyes, not from fear but from recognition. A recognition so deep it seemed carved into her soul long before she was born. "They're not ordinary children," she whispered, her voice trembling, barely a breath. "They never were." The millionaire turned to her, heart pounding, struggling to understand. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice almost cracking. "What is happening to them? To us? To the world?" The cleaning woman looked at him, and for the first time since they met, there was no timid humility in her gaze, only truth, and an immense ancient sadness. She sat beside the twins, placing a hand gently on each tiny chest. The glowing light pulsed beneath her palm, beating in perfect unison with her own heartbeat. "For weeks," she said softly, I felt a presence around them, a warmth, a guidance. I didn't understand it at first. I thought it was only my imagination, or maybe my prayers for your family. But I was wrong. Her voice broke. They were sent. The millionaire shook his head, confused, desperate. Sent by whom? The woman inhaled deeply, her voice steadying as though strengthened by invisible hands. Sent by the one who knows when the world is losing its way. Sent to remind humanity of what it has forgotten. Sent to restore what fear has destroyed. They carry something within them, something the earth lost long ago. The glow grew brighter, soft, enveloping, almost angelic. The babies turned their heads toward the woman, smiling with a peace that pierced the millionaire's heart like a blade made of light. He fell to his knees beside the crib. "But why my children?" he whispered. "Why them?" The woman touched his shoulder with a gentleness that felt like forgiveness. "Because light chooses where it is most needed, not where it is most expected." Outside, the wind began to rise, not violent, but majestic, as if the skies themselves were bending toward the earth. "And what happens now?" the man asked, tears falling freely down his face. The cleaning woman closed her eyes, listening to the whisper only she seemed able to hear. "Now," she said slowly, with a certainty that settled like truth itself, "now, the world begins again." The glow faded, silence settled, and for the first time since the strange events began, everything felt still. The babies sighed softly and drifted back to sleep. The millionaire wept, not from fear, but from a hope he thought he would never feel again. And the cleaning woman, humble and radiant in ways no one could ever explain, stood quietly by the crib, knowing that this night was only the beginning of a destiny far greater than any of them had imagined. A destiny the world had been unknowingly waiting for. A destiny now awakened.